Okay, did that really work? Well, it says we're on live, so I'm just gonna take it that we are. Welcome everybody. Today is the last day of the Council of Parties 29, COP29, and we are here to close everything out, hopefully, and start to prepare for Brazil for COP30. Let's see. I'm just going to go around to everyone. We'll start with Matthew, who has the lovely background there of the night in Baku. What did you see today? What did you think? Where are we at?
Yeah, so it's been 2 days since the last Democrats broadcast, and a lot has happened, and a lot hasn't happened. And just as a bit of a forewarning, I am out here enjoying a beautiful night here at the sea, and it's a gorgeous backdrop. But I apologize if there's some wind noise getting into the microphone. But yeah, so today specifically at the conference, I saw quite a bit of nothing. And I do mean that not just as like a metaphor, but so many people have left already. So many of the pavilions where NGOs and countries are set up for the 2 weeks were already broken down by this morning. And many of the activities that were going on in the conference, the press rooms, in the plenary halls, things like that, were not open to the public, and they were which makes sense given that there's final negotiations and things going on. But there was not quite a lot for observers to do today at COP, so that was definitely my main takeaway. It was definitely interesting to be able to walk around all of these exhibits and stuff, and there to just not really be anyone there, and kind of get to really look at just the decorations and structures that were left. They're definitely an interesting vibe, as the folks my age say. Um, but yeah, there's definitely an air um, of concern about the negotiations that are going on. I know, at least for me personally, the fact that we can't really keep up with what's being said now is a little bit concerning. And of course, it's not a surprise. That's how these things go. But with the backdrop of the country this is being posted and the number of folks with oil ties that were invited and given special treatment at the conference, my hopes are not exactly high for the final versions of any of these things that are being negotiated. And that's kind of down on by the fact that there's not an exact final version of all of this stuff that's been negotiated. I mean, we've had a year since the last COP, we've had 2 weeks at this one, but so many countries were still unwilling to compromise together to find a solution. And whatever solutions they do settle upon, there hasn't been a lot of talk about some hard changes, dramatic shifts away from fossil fuels. So it's been a wonderful 2 weeks. I don't know that the outcome of this conference is going to be as strong as we might hope. And as you said in the introduction, after this, we're going to start getting ready for COP30 in Brazil. And the numbers attached to these conferences are getting so high. It's taken 29 conferences to get us to where we are, and the world is still so deeply reliant on fossil fuels and stuff like that. It's definitely, I think the biggest takeaway that I'll have from this conference, from all 2 weeks of this, is that the people have to put in the work. You and me and anyone watching, we are the ones that have to step up and do things at the local level, at the national level, whatever it is. But we can't wait on our leaders to make decisions. We have to kind of force their hands a bit, however it is that happens. So that's going to be my main takeaway from this. And I'm super glad that I'm here, super glad that I've went. And we'll see where the negotiations lead, after tonight. But yeah, that's been my experience today and yesterday.
Super. I hope that in 10 years, you look back at your time at this conference and you think it really did actually make a difference. Um, for sure. Dana, you've been following along online today.
I have. I have.
Uh,
I'm back in Finland now. All the stress of the election and COP and the negotiations, I guess, uh, taught me myself a cold. But I have been following eagerly online, especially with the negotiations. I know that this is crucial because without substantive negotiations, without something we can really count on, it will pretty much negate all the progress that was made in COP28 and will eliminate a strong foundation to go forward in COP30 in Brazil. I know we are hoping for 1.3 trillion in funding for the developing world. It has been 100 billion a year. They would like for that money to have non-interest loans rather than high interest loans and really come from the public sector rather than the private sector. Right now, the first draft came out and people were furious on all sides. Of course, the Saudis didn't want any reference to bringing down fossil fuels, only some kind of emphasis on expanding, tripling renewables and doubling energy efficiency. There's a number floating around at $250 billion. It is not enough. And those paying close attention do think that we might ultimately, in a second or third draft, because this may be extended past tomorrow, might go to $1 trillion, but it might also mean high interest loans, private sector is going to come in. We don't know what the shape of it is, but we do know that what has come out last night has received universal disdain and anger from all parties. The earth is in the balance. And I was thinking about all the sessions that I did attend with America's All In, all the governors and senators and energy secretaries, how hopeful they were that in the United States, the train had left the station, that we were not going back, that we would continue our renewable energy transition. But that's America, also Australia, the developing world, the European Union has brought their emissions down. They will continue to bring their emissions down. But those people in the developing world, their emissions are going up because they need energy. They are also suffering the most catastrophic consequences of climate change. Of course, it's hitting us in the States, it's hitting Australia, but these vulnerable and marginalized communities do not have the resources to deal with them. If we want to tackle this existential crisis, we have got to come through together and solve this problem together. And that means China. Everybody is waiting for China because they have been considered a part of the developing world, but they have now overpassed the European Union in terms of emissions, and they also produce the highest amount of renewable energy. So rather than giving high loans to developing country, they need to come forward and really ante up and help solve this problem for our global community, because we know what's going to happen when the next administration takes office. How much is the United States really going to do?
Well, we've got to keep pushing to make sure that something gets done or not too much is destroyed. Otherwise, we're in a world of deep kimchi, as they say in some places. John, how are you today? How did your day go today?
It was an interesting day. I was doing some reading about the final negotiations and agreements they're attempting to reach, this 1.3 trillion goal for climate financing, loss and damage. And as big a number as that sounds, I think the oil industry is perfectly happy to keep this conference focused on that topic rather than them and rather than the elephant in the room trashing the planet. If you compare that 1.3 trillion, and I've said this before, it's basically, that's just a cost of doing business to these oil companies and governments of nations dependent upon oil revenues. The 1 trillion, put that in perspective. They say that the fashion industry, the clothing industry, I suppose, is like 2.5 trillion. And military expenditure about the same, 2.5 trillion. And fossil fuel subsidies, they estimate, are $7 trillion a year. So even if the fossil fuel companies had to fork over, 1/7 of their subsidies, not gross revenues or profits, but just subsidies, that's a easy deal for them to make, stay in business. And then of course, then you've got the whole wealth class on the planet, and together they're on the order of 14 or 15 trillion dollars. So I think it's largely a distraction from the real issue to focus on quibbling over that number and how to deliver it. And we had the same discussion 3, 4, 5 years ago, and it's like, just agree to it and move on to the actual issue.
Yeah. Yeah, we just have to move on for sure. I would like to now go to our, I guess, semi-daily broadcast of Michael Fiedler's photos from COP. I think that his photos are probably a really big highlight. They're a highlight for me to see every day since I've never been to one of these COPs, but and I probably never will go. Just being honest, I I probably won't ever go. Here we go with Michael's photos.
For the opportunity to show you another set of my photos. So let me share my screen and show you some of the images I have taken today. And since COP was related to agriculture, plus few of my friends asked me, hey, you just keep showing us the images of the plenaries and the meeting rooms, show us something also from Baku. So I decided to show you a few images from the market, which is just behind our house. The block of the flats that you can see in the background, that's not our block of flats, but we live right next to it, and just under our windows there is a huge market. So I walk through that, and here are a few images. So as you can see, it's full of fruit and vegetable, mostly locally grown. And if you want, you can easily get the freshly squeezed pomegranate. It's very cheap and it's very, very tasty. It's really fresh. If you want to get some fresh meat, here is a sign that the cow was just slaughtered, because they just put the head on the ground to show that it's really fresh meat. So another example of really fresh product here in the market. And as you walk through the market, again, you can see fresh vegetable, plenty of various nuts. Some of them I can't even recognize what kind of nuts are there. It makes me feel like I'm a nut. But moving on, you can also get fresh fish. I am guessing they are from the Caspian Sea. The fish market is pretty stinky, so if you want something that doesn't smell so badly, you can go to the spices market that smells pretty nice. If you want something, again, a little bit stinky, you go just a few meters away, and there is the market with the pickled vegetable. It stinks horribly, but some people like it. And of course, the stinkiest, or in my opinion, the stinkiest market is the one with the meat. I don't even know which parts of what sort of meat is this. But as you walk around and take these images, it's fresh. At least we know it's fresh, and you can get. I'm guessing these are fresh heads of. Heads of cows. Goats or sheeps. I'm hoping it's not the heads of dogs I have seen in China previously. Now, this, if you want fresh cow legs, no problem, you can get that as well. Or if you want fresh brains, that's on offer as well. So agriculture is really on the right here. But let me finish the market section with this image. Once again, this would be the pomegranate, and this would be for the agricultural production of we can see in the bazaar. So moving on to COP. I just wanted to highlight once again the security. There are so many police officers everywhere. I took this image from the bus, and as you can see, there is a cops every 50 meters. You just cannot get away from them. Even if you get all the way to the venue, they are there every 50 meters or so. They are simply there. Now, as I entered, this was one of the protests I saw today, but that's nothing new we haven't seen or reported on previously. Typically, it's about the funding. Give us more money. We need the money, and the money will fix it. So it's about the loss and damage funding. So I'm not spending much time on the protest, and I move towards the press conference Karabakh. Actually, I would take issues just with the name of the press conference room, because Karabakh is a region between Armenia and Azerbaijan. So it's a little, well, it's not so little punch. There was a war about this region already, two wars during the last 20 years between Armenia and Azerbaijan. Azerbaijan won the most recent war about 4 years ago. So it's a punch to the Armenians. We call this room, or as Azerbaijani, we call this room, it's Karabakh. So to show the war, we won the war, it's our room. But let's not get stuck here, and let's move in. The gentleman who had the press conference there was the U.S. Secretary of Agriculture, Thomas Vilsack. There was quite a bit of press. I was surprised that's how many press people showed up. But if you walk backwards, and you could see that only half of the room was actually empty. So there was some press, but it was not as crowded as I would have expected. As soon as the press conference ended, there was an opportunity for the journalists to ask their questions. So the gentleman on the left, I think he was from Politico, and he basically asked how to keep Biden's legacy given the results of the recent election. So what the U.S. Secretary of Agriculture answer was, it was basically, it will be the people who got the benefits during the past 4 years. So those are the people who will keep those who will keep the legacy. Funding is available. Partnerships were already started and are extended. Farms are involved, and the funding which has been applied to the agriculture will remain there regardless of the majority in the Congress. I am not so sure that this is the case, but that's what the U.S. Secretary of Agriculture kept saying. I believe this would be the last image from the press conference. Then I went to the main plenary, because there were expressed or there were delivered the national statements from the ministers of environment. I think I went through 4 of these national statements, and that was enough for the day, because it was kind of like copy-paste. They were basically the same. If I could just give you a quick preview, it went like this. Thank you, Azerbaijan, for organizing this great event. We are thankful for organizing it and welcoming us here, and thank you to the nice people of Baku. Now, climate change cost us probably 5 to 7% of our GDP, so it's time to act. We need new ambition collective goals. There need to be finances for the poor African countries to achieve the climate goals. We need to work collectively. So let's work collectively, let's act now. I have heard it so many times. I have heard it in the previous COPs. And if we were now in COP21 or 27 or 35, I'm afraid it will be still the same. So I stood probably 4 of these national statements, and that was enough. So honestly, the most interesting part of the whole session here was when I check out some of the technical equipment the people who take care of the broadcast have there. Then I have to admit that I ended in this room by an accident. Actually, I was heading for room 23 and I did not pay attention. I ended up in room 25. But then there was the LDC Group Daily Coordination Meeting. The LDC is an abbreviation for Least Developed Countries. And I was kind of glad that I ended up here because, well, first, it was supposed to start at 1 p.m. and I was working on some emails and it was quiet there for a while. So I did not really notice that I was in the wrong room. And then the meeting started at 1:17, so roughly 20 minutes late. So 1/3 of the time that the coordination meeting should have taken was just wasted by waiting. And the LDCs, I believe, are about 45 least developed countries that try to coordinate their actions together. So when the facilitator kind of said, "Oh, I'm sorry, I'm 5 minutes late," while he was actually 17 minutes late, then the coordination meeting started, and it was all about loss and damage funding. But I wrote down a few of the expressions that were heard there, and it was mostly, it is still under the discussion. We are still working on that. And so on. Actually, I was probably the only white guy in the whole room, and it was kind of empty. And here is the one slide that they were showing for those about 40 minutes. I don't really like to read the content of the slide, but here allow me to do that. It basically went NFPs, which are the national focal points. So those are typically the heads of the delegations, had a meeting yesterday, and notes will be shared about this meeting today. Unfortunately, there were supposed to be 45 of these NFPs in the meeting yesterday, and only 8 of them showed up. So you can imagine what sort of outcome of that meeting, what will be the outcome of that meeting. Again, ministerial briefing happened today. There will be another ministerial engagement today, and ministers are attending. So be on lookout for different communications. And that was about it. So I spent there 60 minutes, and I learned that there was a meeting yesterday. It's still under discussion, and notes from that meeting will be shared today. This gives you an idea how unproductive the time how unproductively the time can be spent here. But moving on, then I went to the pavilions, and as was mentioned previously, today was the day about agriculture and water. Here is an image from the cryosphere pavilion. I take this image every year or something similar. They always show there these very interesting graphs with curves, and the curves, in my opinion, are just getting worse and worse every year. I was not so sure where to go, so I kind of went with the crowd. And this pavilion looked pretty busy. I was wondering what was happening, and actually it was free food. They were just giving some free food. The queue was way too long for me, way too there. So I kept going. I ended up in another very busy pavilion. That's the Ukrainian pavilion. And here is the reason why there was such a huge crowd, because today is the 1000th. The war in Ukraine has been lasting for 1000 days already. So it's almost 3 years, the war going on there. There was a pretty big crowd, and it was also very international. They were introducing the various speakers as ambassadors. Some of them were really ambassadors from various embassies. Some of them were the party heads, and some of the politicians who spoke there, they were from countries, say, like Sweden, Finland, Germany, Latvia, Lithuania, Estonia. And I took some images of their speeches, and you know, it was kind of depressing to be there. Just to be sort of fair, obviously I had to walk to the Russian pavilion, and that was a different story. It was relax. We are here ready, help you with the digitalization. the pavilion was half empty. There were only very, very few people there. I took also, well, I sat there for a while and listened to the various presentations. They wanted to give you the international feel. So there was this gentleman from Indonesia reporting on one of his projects related to the peatlands. But the project was done in year 2000. I didn't really get it why he was reporting about a project which was 4 years old. Then there was another lady speaking. That's the lady, the person second to from the right, and she spoke flawless English. She was obviously an American. But then I checked her badge, and she was there for Malawi. She was representing Malawi. That was really, really weird. And if you, as you can see, even the moderator of the session on the very left, even he got bored. And if I just show you the previous image, he was really bored the whole time, because reporting on a project which is 4 years old and reporting on somewhere, I think it was somewhere in America, but I can't even remember. It was kind of boring. One last note, this morning I read an article about some Czech influencer who spent last few days in China, and he was kind of regretting that he went to China because he did not realize that he was going to be used for drawing much better image about China than China really is. And today I saw it, it was really live. There were these young people smiling, walking around, giving out free stuff. The gentleman on the left, he had perfect English. He approached every cute girl who walked around, offered some free stuff. He offered to this girl this traditional Chinese lantern, offered, let's take some images for your Instagram and social network. Buying that they are being treated so nicely. The girl on the right, I think she was from the security, and she just showed up and says, I did not get anything. I did not get any free gift. And suddenly the Chinese gentleman was there. He didn't give her one panda. He better gave her 2 pandas just to make sure she was happy. I spent there maybe 15 minutes, and there was a constant rush of people coming in and getting the free stuff. Then I walked to the pavilion just next door, and again, you could just get the free lanyard. Even I was tempted to get the free Chinese lanyard just to have a souvenir, but I did not really take it at the end of the day. And this would be the last image of the day, showing that COP is on for, it's today, I believe, day 9. And there are so many things going on that you need to take a rest, and people are getting tired. So this is an image of few of the young people who attended several of the sessions, and they just needed a break. So they lay down and took a break right there. And with this being said, I'm turning it back to you.
Thank you so much, Michael, for your always insightful commentary and lovely photos. We look forward to seeing them in COP30 next year in Brazil. I'm sure those will be outstanding. Yeah. So, John, you wanted to do a little presentation about COP. You have the floor.
Yeah, I have some slides as well from walking around pavilions and observing what was going on as things were kind of closing out. Most of the pavilions were shutting down even yesterday in the afternoon. Some were still in the middle of closing statements. Heads of delegations would show up and do a speech wrapping up their nation's participation in COP29 with words of inspiration and encouragement. And then a lot of the pavilions were gathering their colleagues, everyone who participated in managing and implementing their programs for the past 2 weeks, and getting their photos. But there were a few pavilions still engaged in content delivery, giving speeches on various issues related to their country or their organization. One interesting talk I heard was in the parliamentary pavilion. A couple of legislators, parliamentary members of House of Commons, I think, in the UK, talking about what their organization, what their house was doing, and expressing dismay that whereas the UK had adopted their NDCs, their emissions reduction goals, but the government, the legislature had only adopted plans, concrete plans for achieving those goals to about 30% of these NDCs. So 70% still they had no idea how they were going to deliver those emission reductions. And the NDCs together from all nations are simply, product of in effect 2015 Paris and the objective of limiting global temperature rise to 1.5 degrees C, a number we've toyed with and perhaps passed this year. So I then continued on and through some of the science pavilions to see what was going on there. And there's a couple of different aspects to the science. And normally you think of chemistry and physics and all of the higher level scientific disciplines, but very important in addressing climate change are the management sciences, like accounting. It seems rather boring, but it's so essential, not only within the managerial space, but within the scientific space. So much of what we call science is really accounting. It's accounting for energy, it's accounting for particular elements or compounds and following it through a system, a product or a service system. And that's what these accountants do, like the Global Carbon Council. Whereas they may focus on carbon credits and things of that sort, but for credits to be properly quantified, takes a lot of effort to make sure you're doing those numbers right, that you're including everything that really goes into a product or a service, and therefore fully accounting for the carbon implications of those. So that's an important aspect of science that many people don't necessarily appreciate. Another is the standards. Once you have practices or procedures or products or services that can contribute to climate solutions, they have to be implemented uniformly and with integrity everywhere. Otherwise, it's a slippery slope down to complete greenwashing. So accounting and standards are both very important in climate solutions and in the overall science sphere of climate change action. The Cryosphere Pavilion is always a center of activity, lots of technical discussions going on there. They have a very detailed display. They make the best use of their space in describing things like the implications of current NDCs, perhaps 2.3 degrees Celsius global temperature rise by 2100, and what those implications might be for ice melt. The same thing with 3 to 3.5 C by 2100, our sort of our current trajectory. And they had displays showing what glaciers in the Tibetan region might be at risk of completely melting away or melting away 50% or more. Another section of the pavilions dealt with agriculture, and there's maybe half a dozen or more agricultural related pavilions. But right adjacent to them was one for natural gas, and they were pointing out how much of food security or agricultural production is dependent upon natural gas, because natural gas is used in the production of nitrogen fertilizers. So a lot of fertilizers are directly derived from fossil fuels. And then they had descriptions of how natural gas is the cleanest and how in this hullabaloo to eliminate fossil fuels, you should go after oil and coal, but leave us natural gas alone. because we're not really the problem, or we're the least of the problem. So it's interesting dynamic and attempt to sort of steer public perception or perception among the leadership class in the climate space. Then I went over to Japan. At the same time, most of the other pavilions had either already packed up and gone or winding down their programs. Japan was still fully staffed and busy talking to any visitors who might come by. They have at least one specific person for each exhibit, and they have maybe 8, 10 specific technology exhibits there. So an equal or greater number of staff available at any given time to interact with people visiting their pavilion. And I talked to a couple of gentlemen who were dealing with the software package, very sophisticated software package dealing with groundwater and surface water. And that's, of course, important for irrigation, major water use, major consumer of energy. If you go to any of these developing nations and they're talking about how they can save energy, the irrigation sector is a primary objective for them because so much of their energy goes into food production. And they were very helpful describing their software, very comprehensive tool, very intricate, and that's my background, so I was able to talk with them in detail about it. So I was impressed at the product. So it leaves you with an overall impression that if you want to address climate change, if you just give the assignment to the Japanese and give them enough money and time, they can probably move us in the right direction at a faster pace than anything else that's happening. And next to them was a nuclear pavilion. They were talking about tripling nuclear energy production in the coming years. And of course, unfortunately, if they're going to try to ramp up that quickly, they're probably going to be looking at the older, more dangerous nuclear technologies rather than the experimental ones that are currently under development. But let's hope they can climb that learning curve to much safer mechanisms for delivering nuclear energy and ramp those methods up instead. They had a display showing the relative carbon impact of various sources of energy, and the tallest of these bars is, of course, coal, and then the smallest is biofuels with carbon capture and storage, and then you've got the hydro, the nuclear, the wind, and the solar, all very small carbon footprints relative to their energy delivery. So those are all areas we need to focus on. And then they had this one here about carbon sequestration projects. And I'd be interested to learn more about that one, because if it's really that low an intensity, a carbon emitter, that it represents a very productive direction into which you could allocate much of the gas energy and other fossil fuels. They talked about hydropower being 36%, nuclear 23%, solar and wind 20 and 14% respectively. So hydropower still globally is a major player in the renewable sector, but there's a lot of debate about hydropower depending upon the location, because not only does it have implications for the habitat, the ecosystems of the region, but the sediments that accumulate, that wash off the landscape and settle at the bottom of these reservoirs, can be a major source for methane production. So it's important that in each landscape where hydropower is used, that they properly characterize the sediments and what is the true carbon benefits, the carbon emission benefits of hydropower. And I don't believe that that's going to be a uniform answer for each nation, each landscape type, but I'd like to see a lot more research in that direction. Then I took a look at the Ukraine exhibit. They had these little notes that people were posting about potential contributions of individuals and what their activities are attempting to address climate change. And one was talking about agriculture, very important, but the thing that caught my attention in their display was this solar panel, which is I'm not sure it'd be a metaphor for the climate, as opposed to just a microcosm, a small example of what's going on, where the ravages of war can tear apart any progress on climate change, either reduce it through its direct activities or secondary. So that's a very moving physical display showing the one small aspect of the destructiveness of war, but how it directly ties into climate and indirectly. Then Malaysia had a very good display. They had a timeline of their nation's progress in this COP process. And it dates back to 1992 when the first Rio Earth Summit took place. And then fast forward another 10 years until the Kyoto Protocols were adopted. And then in the years soon after that, the next 10 years approximately, they adopted goals of reducing their nation's carbon emissions by 40% by the year 2020. And that's, I guess, 4 years ago. And then you fast forward to 2020, and they set a new goal of achieving 45% reduction, because in those years in Malaysia, I'm sure their carbon emissions actually increased from 1992 to 2020. So now they set a new goal of reducing by 45% by 2050. And you can guess what this timeline is going to look like 10, 20 years from now. So it's every nation, I'm sure, has exactly the same sort of timeline and same sort of experiences, because every nation has been going through this UN process together and making similar commitments and having similar failures to achieve those goals over the decades. And time in years and decades just quickly slips past us. So we had a nice wrap-up visit with our group, and a lot of smiles and goodbyes as people wrap up their time here in Baku and head out. So that was a lot of today, and said some goodbyes this afternoon, and very much appreciated spending the time with the group here. And then, of course, next year, Brazil.
Wow, thank you, John. That was a great presentation. Yes, that was a wonderful presentation. It's a little bit bittersweet, though, for me, for sure.
As we head into one thing that stuck out that you remarked on hydropower, and thinking towards next year in Brazil, that I don't know if you know this, but 89% of the energy produced in Brazil is from renewables, and of that, 63% comes from hydropower. And John is the engineer here, and I did not understand or know about these issues with sedimentation. That will be an interesting issue to explore when we are there.
Brazil's another interesting case, particularly from the biofuels perspective. They have a major industry of producing alcohol from sugarcane, and there's various technologies. The Brazilians, I actually did a project on this 10 years ago, maybe 12 years ago, and compared Florida's methods for biofuel production with the Brazilians. And the Brazilians are able to achieve this conversion process with a much lower carbon footprint than what's been traditional, say, in the corn ethanol industry in the United States. So there's some things to be learned from the Brazilians on this front. Of course, a lot of that is dependent upon land, and again, going back to proper accounting. Sometimes if you don't do the accounting properly on biofuels, it looks green, but when you dig a little deeper, you uncover hidden costs and damages and implications from the biofuels. And an important thing to also understand is that biofuels, it's a farm product. That same farm could be producing food. And when
that same farm might have been rainforest and plowed down.
Exactly. So there's alternate uses for these landscapes. And And when you look at the energy that might come from, in a place like Azerbaijan, one thing you realize is how much people depend upon cooking oil for their caloric intake. And these same oils can be shoveled into a type of, diesel engine and run your SUV down the highway. And what's really interesting is the amount of oil or organic matter to fuel a human being for a day will only get your SUV like a mile and a half down the road. So these trade-offs are very stark between supporting people living and their luxury consumption of transportation. So a lot of interesting discussions to be had and explored there in Brazil next year.
Wow. I can't believe we're almost at the end of our broadcast. This has been an interesting conference as a person on the outside looking in. I hope that something got accomplished for sure. Let's go around and let's make our final statements and take our leave of the good people of Facebook until next year. Dana, please.
Yeah, I'd like to, representing Democrats Abroad, Environment and Climate Crisis Council, it has been very interesting and productive for me at the edge of this catastrophic election to attempt to meet with US officials and to understand that the train really has left the station, to have some hope for the trajectory of the US transition to renewable energy. So that it means that states, state governments, municipal governments, local activists, and us, we must work all the harder to make sure that local communities, that we are all in it together to make sure this carries forward in the coming years until 2026, when we take back the Senate and we take back the Congress. This is not the time to recede. This is the time to get more active. This is the time to become more resilient and to become a part of the resistance. This is solidified my belief all the more in discussing with US officials, because the infrastructure has been created for us. It was created in 2016 during the first Trump presidency. So I hope that America will continue to participate at the state levels, at the municipal levels in this global process, even if we withdraw federally, and it's time to get to work to take it back. And I look forward to next time.
Thank you, Dana. Matthew, what would you like to give as a closing statement for this great event?
Sure. It's been an interesting 2 weeks. Some highs, a lot of lows. But I don't think I can really do much better than kind of repeating Dana's call to action. It's easy to get pessimistic, and there's a lot of things to be pessimistic about. The outcome of this conference isn't ideal. The outcome of the US election was far from ideal. But we kind of have to use those things as fuel. Those kind of, we can't afford to not use those as opportunities to say, well, that means I've got a lot of work to do. And that's kind of how I think we should all walk away from that, is that this is, more so than ever, this is the time to fight. We can't afford not to. So there's a lot left for us to do. And I think that we need to take what we see and what we're disappointed with, and turn those into goals, turn those into action. There's no sense in being overwhelmed by it. There's too much to do. So there's, the outcomes have not always been what we hope for, but we keep fighting nonetheless. So that's what I'm going to be walking away with.
Right. Thank you so much, Matthew. It's been very nice to meet you this year.
You as well.
John, please, your final statements about this COP29 event?
Well, I want to thank Democrats abroad, you and Dana, for joining with us, the Democratic Environmental Caucus of Florida, in doing these briefings for Democrats everywhere. And I want to thank Matthew and then Rock earlier, the young people, for participating in this. And then, as always, my trusty sidekick and partner in all of this for decades is Michael Fidler. So it really takes a group effort for us to properly engage this conference. And as you point out, it can be a frustrating experience, but there are some things to be taken away, some constructive actions. And as I pointed out before, whereas the negotiations and national commitments to sort of political dimensions of climate change come and go and swing back and forth with the political pendulum, what doesn't seem to change is once some technologies get traction, they take off regardless of who's in power in office. So we, as Democrats, need to make sure we continue to stress the importance of investments in education, research, and technology as dependable contributions to solving the climate crisis. And then as we're able, we'll make progress on the political front. We Democrats are often accustomed to setbacks quite often, so it's not really a big deal for us to just hunker down and work towards the next 2 years. So, sometimes it requires inspirational speeches to get Democrats to commit to the next election cycle. But I think we're all in it for the long term. Democrats are a committed group, and we'll get through the next years and work towards the midterm elections and see what we can accomplish.
Thank you very much, John. I would just like to say, how can I put this? That the oil companies and scientists have known about what is happening when we use oil and gas since before, I'm going to just guess that since before anybody that's on this panel was born. And at this point, it's not a matter of what they want. It's a matter of what we need to do as individuals, as groups, as countries, as cities, as neighborhoods, to force more action and to take action on our own. We're at a point where people are not going to be able to predict what is going to happen next. They can guess, but the temperature that the Earth is at or that it's headed for, is at a temperature that we haven't seen in hundreds of thousands or millions of years. And this is insanity. We've got to stop. We've got to all take action. I know nobody was expecting me to say this, but I just feel like actual just everyday people aren't taking this serious, and that the countries are negotiating loss and damages. And the reason that they're concerned about loss and damages is because they know that nothing is going to happen to slow this train down. I know that we're on the road, but we need to, some of us are on the road and some of us are sitting back in our gas-fueled cars, or some of the people are using cold fuel cars, and they're continuing to pollute or not be concerned about what is happening. So I beg everyone to please take this seriously. Climate things are happening every day. People are losing their lives. They're losing their homes. And everyone keeps talking about, I constantly hear this, no offense, about the youth. And I want our youth to grow up and live long lives. But you know what? I also want to live a long life. I still have many years of my life to live, and I don't want to die in a climate incident. I don't want my family to be killed in a climate incident. I don't want my friends. I don't want my town. There was a town in Germany that was about an hour away from where I live, that it was one of these situations where they got like a month's worth of rain in several hours, and it destroyed the whole town. The town is gone and they're trying to put it back. But we don't have to live like this in fear. We just have to take steps, look into something, Google something, talk to your representatives, talk to your town council, start a neighborhood group about this. But we all have to take steps, because if we don't, then loss and damage funds will be useless for all of us. So with that,
Angela.
with that,
And I just want to
Wanna-
thank John and
Yeah.
Mikhail and the entire team. This is the second year we have joined forces, and it has been enriching experience for me, and I think for everybody. And I look forward to continuing that cooperation.
yes, I do
Mikhail,
too.
who's not with us now, Rob and Matthew and Angela and John. Thank you very much.
Yes, thanks to everyone, for sure. Democrats abroad and definitely the DECF will continue to work together to bring you these broadcasts, to go to COP together, and to try to make things happen in a world that seems a little bit too complacent for the actual emergency state that we're in. So yes, thank you, Rock. Thank you, Michael, for your lovely pictures. Thank you, Matthew. Thank you, John. And of course, thank you, Dana. And we will see you for sure in 2025.